My paper focuses on the topic of demonizing the Jew. In the first 4 centuries of the Common Era, the Church was dealing with Judaizers, a group of Christians with sympathies to their contemporary Judaism. Particular Jewish holidays, such as Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Pesach, Shavuot, and their celebrations in the synagogue exercised a kind of allurement to Christians who were already active members of the Nicene Church. In their minds, the two words, synagogue and ecclesia, were synonymous, for they both denoted a religious gathering to worship God. Besides the attraction which the synagogal liturgical life exercised upon some Christians, deeper reasons weighed in for those Christians to want to participate in common religious gatherings with Jews in parallel with their participation in the religious life of their ecclesiastical communities. Contemporary Jews were understood as the descendants of the biblical Israelites and Old Testament Jews. They read the Bible in Hebrew and or in Greek. They worshiped God and abhorred idols. They observed the law which God had given them through Moses. Their synagogues were places of God's worship, and their ceremonies, which were legislated in the Bible and continued over time, were seen as valid expressions of God's worship. Most importantly, though, Jews were still seen and considered as the chosen people of God. In the early Christian and Byzantine imagination, the threat of Jews collectively as an ethnic group, as the continued chosen people of God, had to be addressed in a way that not only would discontinue this belief among Christians, but that would actually annihilate it as a Jewish theological concept that could still be considered valid. In this paper, I'm arguing that Christian authors impersonated Jews as demons in order to deter Christians from believing in the concept of Israel's chosenness. Especially in Christian Byzantine apocalyptic literature, Byzantine authors built upon earlier theologians' efforts to demonize Jews in the sense of seeing them as demons, and they put an emphasis, on the one hand, on the lineage and the kinship relationship between Jews and demons and/or Satan, and on the other hand, on particular physical characteristics of the Jews as a way to instill fear that associating with Jews would result in Christians resembling to and having the same fate with them. The Jewish perception of the synagogue as a place for God's worship was incompatible with the Christian concept of the worship of God only in the church. Ambrose writes in his letters about the burning down of the synagogue of Callinicum on the Euphrates River in 388 of the Common Era at the instigation of the local bishop, an action which the ecclesiastical writer approves on the basis of the incompatibility of worshiping God in the synagogue and of the synagogue as the space for God's worship. John Chrysostom, in his 4th century homilies against the Jews, addresses the issue of the worship of God in the synagogue by means of the participation of Judaizers in the synagogue services in Antioch, the area of his ecclesiastical jurisdiction, during the period of the Jewish high holidays. Chrysostom attacks the Jewish institution and calls it a dwelling place of demons. His statement remains purposefully ambiguous to encapsulate a broad range of interpretation by his Christian audience. On the one hand, it suggests that the synagogue was a space in which actual demons resided. This reading raises the issue of their reality and the people's belief in them. As Ellen Muberger has written with regard to the existence of angels for late Asian Christians, the term real, quote, was synonymous with angels being culturally operational, end quote, suggesting that, quote, Christians expected angels to exist and to persist, and they accepted that angels could interact with human beings, even if only select ones, end quote. We can thus assume that the same stood with regard to the existence of demons. So it may not be surprising that Chrysostom believed indeed in demonic residence in synagogues. On the other hand, Chrysostom's remark suggests that he imagined Jews as demons, creating a hybrid identity that emerges from the two. In other words, impersonating Jews as demons the ecclesiastical writer conceives of them as demons, an image that can justify his statement of the spatial dueling of demons in the synagogue. The hybridization of Jews and demons is attested more clearly in Chrysostom's affirmation that demons reside in the souls of Jews. In so doing, Chrysostom plays with the double idea of actual demons residing in the synagogue and Jews being also the demons who attend the synagogue when he writes, "You must apply the same argument to the synagogue. Even if there is no idol there, still demons do inhabit the place. Does not greater harm come from this place, since the Jews themselves are demons?" Moving from the inanimate demonization of the synagogue as a building to the animate demonization of Jews, Chrysostom proceeds to create a hybrid between Jews and demons, contributing to the idea of demons becoming Jews, of Jews and becoming demons. Imagining the souls of the Jews as the lodging place for demons, he sets the wheels in motion to warn Christians against associating with Jews and hints at the consequences that such a relationship might have. Imagining Jews as demons and thus creating a hybrid between Jews and demons makes a new kind of demon, the Jew demon, who are portrayed more dangerous than demons themselves, for they lurk to deceive Christians by enticing them to participate in Jewish ceremonies. For Chrysostom, the synagogue as an institution poses a greater threat than pagan temples in which idols signal demonic presence. For a synagogue hides any indication of such a presence due to the concept of Israel's chosenness, corroborated by the fact that the Jews worship God, they abhor idols, and honor the prophets whose ancestry they share. In all the instances in which Chrysostom refers to Jews and demons, the Church Father deploys these words interchangeably, allowing us to see that in his theological mind, the two are interconnected to the extent that their identities are identical. In so doing, he aims to warn his Christian audience that their interaction with Jews equates to interaction with actual demons. Consequently, several religious activities in Jewish spaces, such as participation in the synagogue services, eating with Jews during the high holidays, and seeking cure from Jewish physicians, bring Christians in an association with demons and are ways for Christians to be led astray. In particular, seeking cure from Jewish physicians is one interaction that Chrysostom paints with the direst of colors. If you get some slight illness, will you reject God as your master and rush off to the demons and desert over to the synagogues? What pardon will you find after that? How can you call on God for help again? Therefore, beloved, do not be swept off by the deceits of the demons, but stand firm in your fear of God. For Chrysostom, seeking cure from Jews equates to seeking cure from demons. Equating the two accentuates Chrysostom's impersonation of Jews as demons, with the ecclesiastical author to apply conditional terms to the healing process, suggesting that a Christian patient should choose death, which would transform them to a martyr of the Christian faith, over receiving healing that originated from Jews. Due to imagining Jews as demons, Chrysostom attributes to Jews the same characterizations that he attributes to Satan, calling them murderers and advising Christians to not go to Jewish physicians for the fear of losing their spiritual lives. In Chrysostom's homilies against the Jews, there are two pressing issues. Firstly, imagining and seeing Jews as demons, which is also indicated by the way in which Chrysostom uses the two words interchangeably, to the extent that they become synonymous in his rhetoric. And secondly, Christians' interactions with Jews and by extension with demons due to the Jew-demon hybrid. Although this is not mentioned explicitly, these concerns suggest the eventuality of the making of another type of hybrid, that of a Christian demon, who after they have been deceived by demons have rejected God. Taking into consideration Jews' association with demons and the identical use of the two to the extent that the Jew equates to a demon, it is not surprising to read Ephraim the Syrian calling Jews demoniacs. In Isibin, hymn 61, the Syrian theologian presents death and Satan to converse with each other. Here, the Jews are accused of performing certain sacrifices to demons, a possible reference to the Old Testament incident of certain biblical Israelites sacrificing their children to Moloch. Ephraim calls those Jews demoniacs and merges the Jews of the past, biblical Israelites, with the contemporary Jews, suggesting that the latter have also been possessed by demons and act as such. In an underground way, Ephraim continues the hybrid identity of the Jew demon who digresses and breaks God's law. In Byzantine Apocalyptic literature, the demonization of Jews and impersonating Jews as demons takes another form, one that underlines a lineage and kinship between Jews and demons, physical resemblance, and eternal punishment that connected Jews and demons as a joint category in the same space of eternal punishment. In the Apocalypse of Anastasia, a work that was written between the 10th and the 12th centuries of the Common Era, and narrates the tour which Archangel Michail gave to the nun Anastasia during her 3-day-long illness. Anastasia is taken to a tour in hell after she was granted a tour to the 7 gates of heaven. In the Paris, Milan, and the Palermo versions of this work, Anastasia is led to the only place in hell which is guarded by angels and is where Jews are kept for their eternal condemnation. According to the Paris, Milan version, Anastasia narrates, "And I saw a pit having 7 mouths, and an angel guarded it. And there came up from it fire and gloom and darkness of the worms. In it are condemned the Antichrist and the Jews. Whosoever did not believe the incarnate dispensation of God, the Word, the heathen, those who neither have law nor believe in Christ." In this locus of eternal punishment, 4 condemned groups are placed: the Jews and the Antichrist, the deniers of the incarnation of the second person of the Trinity, and heathens. The author offers us an interesting classification. Whereas heathens and the deniers of the dogma of incarnation are mentioned separately as individual categories, the Antichrist and the Jews are mentioned jointly, with the author to seem to purposefully highlight an association between the two. We see a similar classification in the Palermo version of this work, with 2 differences. First, the Jews are not mentioned by their ethnic identity, but under the description underlings. And second, the deniers of the dogma of incarnation are identified as priests. According to the Palermo version, Anastasia recounts, "And again, the angel showed me a great pit, having 7 mouths, and the angels guarded it, and pits and fire and gloom mounted up to it. And the angel said to me, in this pit the devil with his underlings is condemned, and the priests who do not believe the incarnate dispensation, and the heathens, those who do not have the fear of God, but unjustly snatch away the toil of the poor like wolves." Here the author has substituted the underlings or subordinate ones for the Jews and the Antichrist for the devil, and has created a hierarchical, almost intimate relationship between the two, one that shows a state of ownership, which is missing from the Paris Milan version. Interestingly, whereas for the deniers of incarnation/priests and the heathens, we read about the reasons for their punishment in both versions of the Apocalypse of Anastasia, no explanation is given for the punishment of the Jews in either version. It seems that merely the interrelatedness of the Jews with Antichrist and the devil in the Paris Milan and the Palermo versions respectively suffices for their joint punishment. To put it in another way, associating the devil/Antichrist with Jews constructs an image of the Jews as devils who are mentioned along with their prototype. In the life of Saint Basil the Younger, a text written on the second half of the 10th century of the Common Era, and which belongs to the hagiographical and apocalyptic genres, the author attacks the concept of Israel's chosenness by attempting a connection between Jews and devil. Gregory confides in Basil his thoughts that Jewish beliefs might also be correct based on them following the law. Basil rejects such a possibility, calling Jews sons of the devil and the heirs of the Antichrist, creating a kinship relationship between the two. For the author of this work, adherence to the law and belief in God cannot absolve the contemporary Jews of the accusation of murdering Jesus. Does Basil's rebuke suggest the presence of a Jewish influence on the church and on the Christians of the time? The answer is probably no. We do not see the same concerns with John Chrysostom about the influence of a Jewish community upon the church. Chrysostom's Christians believed that salvation could also stem from attending the synagogue. Gregory, on the other hand, does not suggest participation in the liturgical synagogal life. Remaining on a theological level, he expresses only the opinion of the correctness of the beliefs of contemporary Jews, whom he distinguishes from the Jews of the time of Jesus. Continuing Gregory's rebuke and his anti-Jewish tirades, Basil imagines Satan in the same cohort with Jews, for which he says, Jews are the assemblage of Satan. For whenever they gather together on the Sabbath in their synagogues and examine the law, the Lord is not in their midst. Rather, Satan is in their midst, in every assemblage of their rejoicing and resting among them. Satan has inherited them and has placed his loathed name upon them. And they are called his sons, a line of inheritance and the party of Antichrist. Gregory, cast far away from you this sinful notion, knowing that it has come to you from the evil one. The author applies Revelation 3:9 to buttress the image of Jews being interrelated with Satan. The author creates a spatial dichotomy between Satan and God's presences by portraying Satan to be spatially present in the synagogue as opposed to God, who is spatially present in the church. He further underlines the kinship relationship between the two, which is instigated through the legal process of inheritance to argue for the deprivation of Jews of their designation as God's chosen people. On that note, Jews' association with Satan is also on a noetic level, for the idea that Jews believe in God has a satanic provenance. The attack by Satan on behalf of the Jews of Christians' mind generates an additional level of relationship, one that establishes Satan and Jews as advocates for each other and collaborators to lead astray Christians like Gregory. At the end, Jews' lineage with Satan by law aims to support Jews' impersonation as devils themselves. A transformation of the Jews into devils is now buttressed by their physical description as they assemble on God's left for judgment. The Jews are depicted with black and crooked hands and feet and with filthy faces, the filth being a mixture of dog feces and rotten blood. Their eyes were coated with mucus and their ears were covered with soot, exuding an insufferable odor. Thick liquid came out of their mouth and their tongues hung out of them, exuding also the smell of smoking sulfur. Engaging in an acute invective against the Jews, the author rejects their kinship with ancient Israelites and instead argues for their kinship with Satan, impersonating Jews as demons. Fabricating an imaginary discussion between Moses and the Jews at the moment of their judgment before God, Moses accuses them of their disbelief in Jesus. O foolish ones, slow in heart to believe in all the declarations of the prophets and the law itself, the very law which I gave you about the glorious incarnation of our Lord Jesus Christ. You are not sons of Abraham, but of Satan, whose likeness is now seen in your limbs. Having given a demon-like description of the physical appearance of the Jews, the author presents Moses to ascertain not only the kinship relationship between Jews and Satan, but also the Jews' likeness to Satan. This lineage creates the new hybrid of the Jew demon that we already saw in Chrysostom's writings, but now it is given in terms of physical resemblance. The spiritual and physical condition of the Jews corroborates to their expulsion from the state of the chosen people of God. In the life of Saint Andrew the Fool, another work from the late 10th century of the Common Era, which belongs to the hagiographical and visionary texts, the Jews are described to have fallen from God's grace and wait for the Antichrist. The relation between Jews and the Antichrist calls into question the Jewish concept of Israel's chosenness. In conclusion, the demonization of Jews in the sense of seeing and thinking Jews as demons and not merely seeing Jews as evil was a long process that began with associating and equating Jews with demons, so much so that the two were used interchangeably, and continued with describing Jews as having the physical characteristics with which demons in Christian imagination were portrayed. Demonizing the other and making subhuman or superhuman expressions of the other was not an unknown process in the pre-modern world. Reducing the other to a non-human was a way to annihilate the other through contempt and fear, revealing anxiety regarding the boundaries that needed to be imposed on part of the party that engaged in the process of the other's demonization. The association of the Jews with the devil has a long tradition, as Joshua Trachtenberg has showed in his seminal work, The Devil and the Jews, in literary sources through descriptions of their features or references to them as collaborators of demons and Satan's agents. In art, where, quote, the Jew's affiliation with the devil might be signaled by placing the Jew in hell, perching a demon on the Jew's shoulder, giving the Jew subtly beast-like features, wrapping a snake around the Jew's eyes, having the Jew give an obscene kiss to a cat, or depicting the Jew with a goatee, tail, and/or horns, end quote. And even in folk culture, in which Jews are transformed to demons and creatures of the other world. However, Jews from late Antique and Byzantine Apocalyptic texts point to a more nuanced understanding of the demonization of Jews. Jews in Christian imagination became real demons with kinship relations with Satan to the extent that their physical resemblance points to precisely the making of the Jew hybrid, that of the Jew demon. Placing Jews in the same space with demons and the devil and referring to both jointly Byzantine Christian apocalyptic and visionary texts, corroborated by their content, aimed to put an end to Israel's chosenness, even if only in the imaginary level. Thank you.